Father Larry Toschi, Oblate of St. Joseph from the Shrine Parish of Our Lady of Guadalupe, co-patroness of the unborn in Bakersfield, California. We've heard wonderful talks from the Archbishop, from Father Luke, as priests particularly. The deacons mostly have wives, but as priests particularly, it's helpful for us to hear from couples who witness in their own lives. And we have two wonderful couples with us who can testify to conversion. One cradle Catholics, and others, I think, converts to Catholicism. And we begin with Francisco and Elva Arroyo, are from my parish in Bakersfield. They help for years with our workshops, Life-Giving Love, 2-day workshops that provide the spirituality and theology of motivation and reason for NFP. They're also certified teachers, a real missionary spirit. They travel to other places, particularly in Spanish, that do not have teachers, and will travel to teach the method and try to encourage others to become teachers. So we're happy to hear the witness they have to give us of their own lives.
Good afternoon. Do you want to introduce us?
I'm a little nervous, but normally, which, like Father was saying, we share in Spanish. But a few years we've been teaching in English. We teach sharing in English. And we're Francisco and Elba Arroyo. We're married for 35 years. And yes, we have 6 children. We were blessed with 6 children. As a responsible parent, we're open to life, and we plan it. And every one of them is a gift of God for us, you know. So we're from Bakersfield. I was thinking, man, where's all the couples? I said, priest. So I was gonna say the beginning of my journey when I was starting NFP, or my lifestyle, you know, was a little negative. We were in love for 5 years, and then we got married to the church. And then we left marriage encounter in Spanish. And I told my wife to the marriage encounter, I said, don't get committed to anything. And they asked, they asked the couples go after the weekend. We went back and they said, who wants to participate in the next encounter? And I said, I raised my hand. I said, I want to help in the kitchen. So I started in the kitchen by cleaning, and I didn't cook. I don't know how to cook. She cooked for me real good. So I started supporting the church by going to church every week, every Sunday. At the beginning, I didn't want to go, you know, for X reasons. I don't want to get short story long. Anyways, I started to go to church. And when Elba invited me to go NFP, I said, what is NFP, you know, on Billings? I said, you go and let me know. So the first class, she went by herself. And I said, I was more selfish. I didn't know. I was ignorant. I even criticized the priest. What do the priests know? They don't have a wife. So anyways, I thank God for Father Larry, because he's a great teacher, and he's a motivator. He's a great, he challenged me a lot. I said, when he told me, Frankie, you need sharing in English. I said, Father, I don't speak good English. I said, but I said, if I just gotta learn French or Chinese, I'll do it. So couples can learn the NFP, because it's been a blessing for us, you know. Yes. So I get a little nervous, but she's here, Father here, so and okay. I'm okay, so I'll alternate.
So, like Frank said, we were high school sweethearts, but I decided when he asked me in our second year of going together, he asked me to marry. I said, yes, but not through the church, because of the negative reference that I had of marriage. And so after 5 years of cohabitation, I felt in my heart the yearning to receive our Lord in the Eucharist. And I remember one particular thing that happened in our life that triggered for me returning to our faith and being a faithful Catholic. It was a Sunday, we were watching football, and then there was a knock on the door, and it was very persistent, and I said, Frank, God is calling us. And he's like, you're crazy.
Jehovah's Witness.
Quiet. They can go away. So that triggered in me a yearning to go back to church. And thankfully I did. He never opposed. He said, go. If you want to go, go. But with 3 little ones, it was tough. And then that awoken something in me. Going back to church and not receiving our Lord in the Eucharist started a revolution in my heart. It was just, I was not in peace. I had the teachings. My mom has a strong devotion to our Blessed Mother, and she prayed the rosary every day. And so I knew she was praying for me. And for me to come back to church every Sunday, it just kind of awoke something that was dormant in me, the desire of being a faithful Catholic. For that reason, I started going to a prayer group, and then it was in one of the Sundays, a particular Sunday, Father Lupe welcomed me, made me feel very welcome. At the end of the Mass, he made it a point to come out and shook my hand. I was going on the side, by the side with my 3 little ones, and I felt very welcome. I thought, oh, he noticed that I received the Eucharist. I was embarrassed, but he made me feel very welcome. And he invited me to come back to a prayer group. And if you feel lonely, he said, come to prayer group. And he invited me to a mission, Holy Spirit mission. And that started my journey back on growing and opening my heart. I started reading scripture, which was, I had never had that practice. And I discovered the why we need to receive our Lord. I discovered the reason that we have to be worthy of receiving him. And there was a conflict because Frank and I were using condoms. And I did not want to, we were struggling to make ends meet. I did not want to have another pregnancy when Frankie was 9-month-old baby. And that was a big conflict. And the more I kept on going to church, the more conflict I had at home. And so Frank's gave me the gift of showing me his love by saying, okay, I don't really know what it is, NFP, but you go. And then you tell me when you're ready. Because I told him I didn't really had that information. There was no couple coming to us to give me information. But all I knew it was that I needed to learn my fertility awareness so that I can receive my Lord. And thankfully, there was a couple right there in our Lady Guadalupe church, and I started, and I was struggling because we were not in the same page. We were not united in living NFP. And for a year, we struggled. Frank was not willing to abstain while I was learning the process, and that made it a challenge. So I became an excellent housewife, cleaning at night, waiting for him to sleep so that I wouldn't be there. and it was a rough year until we were blessed to meet Fausto and Lourdes Ramirez from the area of Fresno, and we learned, they came to visit. They gave us the gift to spend Christmas vacations, and they taught us syntothermal method. And it was in Bakersfield, when we first moved there used to be a dense fog. It just, learning the method of NFP, syntothermal method, it just lifted the fog. It gave me back the peace. By then we had been married, and it just made me a complete Catholic. Frank and I, and he's here, he can tell you how the difference of coming in our marital embrace and experiencing all the blessings in our being one. And that's why we're here. We were promoters for syntothermal for a long time, for years, and over 10 years. And thankfully, with the strong support of our priest in our Lady Guadalupe church, we felt motivated and challenged. And we said yes after our 6th child was born, and we got certified. And so we teach Spanish primarily, but we also teach, we've taught in English, and through the Couple to Couple League, we've taught through a platform on internet, and in those pockets in our nation where there's no Spanish teachers. And for 2 years now, we've been traveling to the West Coast, to Pismo, and all the way to Solven, and we've been teaching in Spanish. And then also here in San Fernando, St. Elizabeth, we've driven over here to teach. Say something.
One of the, like you was saying at the beginning, when sharing that I was the negative, I was the one that didn't want to do it for machismo, whatever it is, mostly for ignorance and by making judgments. It wasn't easy at the beginning, because I remember one time we learned live Billings, and then we were NFP, and I didn't want to participate. Father was Father was sharing earlier. Dr. Momber said, "You know what? Is this gonna make us better, our relationship, our sexual life? Why don't I just participate?" And I started doing that, participating. I get up in the morning before I go work. Oh, here's Dr. Momber. Something real simple for the man, you know. So I realized, oh man, I learned when she was for and she was not. And like she was saying, the embracement. I remember the first time we cried together.
Yes. Yes, we did.
Excuse me. I remember the last time that we used a condom, we were already playing NFP, and I insisted so much. I insisted on her, and she goes, "Okay, go ahead and put a condom on it." And I see her face, you know, and I did satisfy myself a man, but it was an emptiness. I said, "It's not what I want. This is not giving me the life." So the quality, the unity that brought us to our marriage.
Great.
That's what I'm here today. And she goes, "They told me we're gonna share today." I said, "That's okay. I'm nervous, but I want this gift that I received in here through here
to share with
so somebody
others.
else can do it." And one of the gifts that like she was saying, we go to some other parishes on the coast and around San Fernando, and one of the couples that receive NFP, we teach them, they learn, and they ask us, "We're gonna get married to church. Can you guys be our sponsors?" I said, "Oh yeah." And next week we're gonna be in Santa Maria. We're gonna be their padrinos. So I said, "Man, thank God. I know we try hard. There's a lot of need for teachers." And one of our challenges, or we want to share with those couples, that if one or two couples can learn it, or more couples, maybe in the future be more teachers. Well, like I was saying, there's so much in our relationship. That's the main thing. Now that I know, and I know it's the time that we're gonna be in abstinence, but now the quality, the unity, making God power and bradle
Marital embrace.
brought us so much happy. And it was said, we're blessed with Father and our challenges.
His support.
And we're where God wants us to go teach, we're gonna be there if we can. I thought we're getting older, but hopefully these couples, they get work on their relationship, learn the NFP, and that's what we're here.
So, yes, praise be to God. That's why we started working with our relationship and with learning a new way of communicating. And the more we got close to our church, we found all the support for all the elements to sustain our marriage: communication, prayer, and NFP. That just, it was like the cherry on top. It made us 100% faithful Catholics, and it brought the graces through our sacrament. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francisco and Elva. Is this working? Our second couple I just met this morning, Timothy and Kristen Putnam, they're from the Seattle, Washington area. They are converts to Catholicism. I'm told in our CANFP website, there's a little video of their story there. I haven't seen it yet. And also that they speak on a radio station. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Happy to hear their story now.
I'm going to start with the end, and then we'll go back to the beginning. We teach the Billings ovulation method together. We have clients on 5 continents, and I haven't kept track of how many countries. So to answer the question about accessibility where there are no teachers, we have this wonderful thing called the internet. And we have the ability to be just about anywhere and still walk with people one-on-one and have that connection with them. We're another one of those NFP couples. We have 7 kids. They were all planned at least 10 minutes in advance. In Blessed Pope Paul VI's other encyclical, Evangelii Nuntiandi, he says, the first means of evangelization is the witness of an authentically Christian life given over to God in a communion that nothing should destroy, and at the same time given to one's neighbor with limitless zeal. Modern man listens more willingly to witnesses than to teachers, and if he does listen to teachers, it is because they are witnesses. When I was in seminary in the Protestant church, some colleagues of mine who were unhappily married converted to Catholicism. In the midst of that conversion, they began using natural family planning, and I watched their fights dry up. And I watched the way that they began to interact with one another in tenderness, whereas before that had not been the case. And so it piqued my interest. Fast forward a year later, I was talking to my wife. We were visiting back where they were living, and I warned her. I said, okay, they're Catholics. They're kind of like golden retriever Catholics. They're really energetic, and you might want to lift your knee just in case they get too close. But I want you to hear about this thing that they do, natural family planning. And so she talked to them about it, and I thought, hey, we're doing good, all right. I've seen the benefits of this. And so we turn our car home for a 15-hour drive, and I bring it up and I say, I think this is something we should do. And for the next 20 miles, I could not stop the tears. And I'm thinking, it was going so well.
I did. They used it and that was good for them. But when he turned it back on, well, this is something that we should do. I didn't know what it was, along with the other misconceptions. This is the rhythm method. I'm going to get pregnant right away. I'm getting married young anyway. And I'm worried about that. I'm not ready to be a mom yet. And to top it off, in college, I lived on a floor of nursing majors. And on that floor, there are, certain ways of thinking about what our lives would be like and what could be used. And, they wanted the data. They wanted to be shown, is this scientific? Is this real? And so I was very hesitant and finally just said, fine, I will pray about it, which basically just meant I want to stop talking about this now. Let's move on. Which
I thought meant I'll pray about it. So a couple of weeks later, I said, what are you thinking? How's that prayer gone? And I came to find out that it really meant stop talking about it. So I said, well, what if we at least went to an informational session and got some information about this? And the people who were who introduced us to it, they were Creighton users, and the nearest teacher that we knew of was about 2 hours away. And so if the 15-hour drive wasn't enough, now let's drive 2 hours to have this informational session. And so there we were, and it ended up really being a first instruction more than an informational session.
It did. She started teaching us about the different mucuses, how it was all scientifically based and all of the research, and I was amazed. I fell in love with it immediately. It was incredible to me how much research had gone into it. And so for this more, scientific mind, I was thinking, okay, this is something that I can do. This is going to work. I'm going to do it. Yes, we can do this.
Now, as you do talk with the NFP teachers in your area, something that was very important that happened there is that teacher recognized how interested she was in the data behind it. And that very first day said, maybe one day you should be a teacher. Mm-hmm. Just planted that seed really early on. And so from there, the inevitable question came up. We were not Catholic. The question came up, so what happens if on your honeymoon you find yourself in the middle of fertility? And I was Protestant. I said, well, we'll use a barrier method. And she was horrified. But she said, well, and I don't even remember where she went, but she took it, instead of talking about reducing effectiveness, the problem with barrier methods, she took it back to religion, which we weren't in that mindset yet, and said, well, you know, that's not really a good thing. And I said, well, that's a Catholic teaching. She said, no, it's a Christian teaching. And I wasn't really interested in continuing that conversation, so I just kind of nodded and smiled and lifted the knee because the golden retriever again. And so we drove home, and for the next 4 years, we used Creighton very effectively, but we used it like Protestants to know when we could use, when we could not have to use barrier methods, and then other times we would use barrier methods. That worked out until I wanted to go back to seminary and finish up a degree to be ordained as a deacon in my tradition. And we needed more money to do that. And I said, well, you know, maybe now is the time to teach, because I already had a full-time job and she was staying home with our 2 kids at the time. And so she went and talked to our Creighton teacher, and she said, why don't you teach Billings? It's shorter, you don't have to spend as much time away from the kids. And so then you went to training.
I did. So I went to this weekend of training. I was the only Protestant at this Billings training, and I ended up having a fabulous weekend. And you know, the other ladies that were there, they were kind of like, why are you doing this? And I was like, well, you know, it's natural, it's good for you, like, you know, so why aren't you Catholic yet? I'm like, well, just not, you know. They're like, oh, just give it time, you know. So, but they were lovely, and they were passionate about their faith, and I had met converts to Catholicism that were very passionate, but these were cradle Catholics that were also very passionate, and that was significant to me. And so I came home from that training, and at that training, it was the first time that I had heard the words sins against chastity. I had no idea what that meant. And there was Father McCaffrey, who I don't know if he's here this weekend, but he was the one speaking. And, you know, it was intriguing because I was like, I don't understand exactly what that means, and I don't know exactly what you're talking about. But I came home with some books, and we started reading them.
So she came back with Theology of the Body and Humanae Vitae. And I enjoy theology, and so I started reading those. And we were newly pregnant because we had been using a barrier method, and I felt, just like you mentioned, I felt the loss of intimacy, and it was profound. And I said, I would rather have nothing than this. And I was just going to stop for the evening, and that just absolutely stunned Kristen. And so we decided, after 10 minutes conversation, that we were open to life that night. And so we were newly pregnant when she had gone to training. I read these books, and I was profoundly convicted. And I said, this is true, and no one else is teaching this. It wasn't enough for me to not disagree with the theology of the Catholic Church in terms of praying to saints or transubstantiation or anything else like that, because I could find some semblance of that in my liturgically backed denomination. But I couldn't find this. And I could see that this was true, and no one else was teaching it. And so there was no other option at that point. I knew at that point that we had to become Catholic, and I knew at that point that we had to quit using barrier methods, and she didn't believe me.
Right. So I was on board with the becoming Catholic. That was okay with me. But yeah, we were newly pregnant. We didn't have to abstain for 9 months. And so I was like, well, when
We'll
this is
see.
over, we'll see if this sticks. And I really didn't expect it to, but it did.
So one of the things that we've been very cognizant of as we teach natural family planning, and we deal with all kinds, probably about 50% of our clients are not Catholic, and probably about 10 to 15% aren't religious of any sort. We want to teach the truth. We want to teach them about the significance of the communion of persons, but we also want to do it in a way that is intriguing to them, rather than just presenting, oh, well, that you're not supposed to do that, to talk about why that is. And to do so keeping in mind that people are today inherently skeptical. There's nothing that they can't find with Siri. My 4-year-old knows that if I don't have the answer to a question, she says, well, just ask Siri, Dad, right? And so we have to make sure that the statistics that we quote that they are in a published journal, that the methodology is solid. You know, I hear a lot of people talk about the low divorce rate, which is true, but it's anecdotal. The study that's often quoted is a self-selected study, and so a person who's truly skeptical and goes and looks at that and sees that the methodology is not as firm, even though it's anecdotally true, then they can dismiss everything else that is solid. So we're very careful about what we say and how we say it. And we also, you know, people say, well, I'm just going to use a barrier method when I'm fertile. And we're like, okay, well, that's, you know, that's understandable. It can take a long time to get to a place where you're willing to do that. Go ahead and chart it, we say. Some teachers won't even teach if they find that out, but encourage your teachers that this could be eventually what brings someone into the church. We say, go ahead and chart it and put a circle around it so that when the pregnancy occurs, we know where it happened, right? Because that way, it reinforces the risk involved. It reinforces that there's a better way, but it also walks with them where they are.
Right. We know how much time it can take to have that conversion experience. And if you can walk with the couple through that conversion experience, going with where they are, it makes a world of difference. And just like Father said earlier, walking with them and speaking the truth. And to those that are not religious that come to us, Timothy is excellent at being able to talk about natural law in terms that the other people understand, whether they're Protestant, whether they're non-religious at all, in ways that they can comprehend and can really grab onto, and then start asking more questions and then asking deeper questions, and they just continue on that walk. And it's a powerful thing to watch.
In the book, I think it's 1 Peter, it says, always be ready with an answer for the hope that's within you. But you notice that they ask the question first. They're asking the question, and then you have an answer. So I say, live a questionable life, right? Live a life that incites those questions, and then be ready to have the answer to follow up.
And that is one thing, you know, going back to just making sure you know where your statistics come from, knowing that we are talking to skeptics like we once were. One thing that I have made it a point to do in any talk that we give is I have a bibliography, and I am one of those people, I love writing research papers that are footnoted. And so I have a bibliography of every statistic, every study, anything that I quote, say, this method is 99.5% effective. Where did you get that? Well, here's the study. And so you can answer those, and you say, go look it up for yourself. Go look at these things in published, peer-reviewed medical journals. Go see for yourself. Dig, find it out. And that often is well received for people that want to really dig into it more.
Even a couple who practices selfishness in their marriage and in their sexuality, ultimately they want connection. And what we can do is we can show them a better way and show them a way that gives them a connection on a level that they've never experienced. And so that's what we're offering. We're not teaching them how to avoid pregnancy or achieve pregnancy. We're teaching them how to live out their marriage in a way that brings them the fullest connection with one another and in a way that comports to natural law.
Thank you so much. We do have an amount of time for questions. We'd ask you for your questions to form in a line at the microphone so we're not waiting to see who jumps up next. And maybe you want to direct your question to the two couples in general or maybe to someone specific. Timothy, Kristen, Elva, Francisco.
Thank you, Father Toski, and thank you to both couples. It's tremendous the work you're doing. I have a question for you, but first a note to the priests. If some of you have not done Mass, a couple of us are going to do Mass in the, what's it called, Father Mario? The Big Bear Room? Big Bear Room at 2 p.m. So if anybody wants to join us for Mass and you haven't had a chance. But my question for the couples, we priests, of course, try to promote the theology of the body, and the Archbishop gave us a lot of practical tasks in his talk in the morning. Is there something, maybe each couple could say one or two things you do specifically to promote the mentality, the antidote to the contraceptive mentality among the people that you work with in your parishes and dioceses? Thank you.
I would say one thing that I do, I always have cards with me. And it is amazing how willing women are to speak about very personal issues when you're at the hair salon, when you're at the craft store, when you're shopping at the mall. I get into conversations with people, and you kind of have your little like elevator speech prepared. You know, I have 7 children trailing behind me a lot of the time. And so, you know, a lot of people will stop and talk to you about that. And so being able to, you know, say, well, you know, they were planned all 10 minutes in advance, or that I teach this natural fertility method, and here's some of the things. And then, you know, they start asking, well, what's that? I don't know what that is. And so then you can tell them, very short version, what that is. Hey, here's my card, go check it out. And it's pretty incredible, at least when it comes to women, that they are very willing to open up to you about things. So I would encourage you to encourage your teachers as well to be willing to talk about it everywhere. It could make someone uncomfortable. It's possible. You don't have to say the word mucus right away. You can hold that back. But, right. But just being willing to talk about it to anyone and have those cards to give out so that they can follow up with you is very important.
And I would say within the church, I think we want to make opportunities available for classes and for things along those lines. But I think the most effective method is discipleship. Find 2 or 3 couples and invest in them, and then set them loose. Let them be the Golden Retriever Catholics to other people, because it's a little scary at first, but there's still a sense of magnetism that's a part of that.
I agree with her that just talk to everybody. We're open to recruit only in the parishes, but previous years before, even in laundromats, we would put an announcement, or even while I was doing my grocery shopping in the line, and just talk, be very open and sharing. And ladies will pick their interest and they'll come to us. Yeah, we also invite in the 6 classes for couples that are going to be married, and then in our church we give the Life-Giving Love workshop, and we give a talk to show the different methods available to them.
One of the biggest challenges, like you were saying, we highly recommend, we notice a difference, like those 6 classes, pre-marriage, and the workshop that you were saying, that makes us more aware. A lot of couples or a lot of men go, well, NFP doesn't work, you guys got 6 kids. I said, it's not that. You just got to know a little more about how it works. Fertility awareness. And after the classes, after the workshop, they're more aware. Oh, is this how? And a lot of them go to the NFP workshop. In one of our first classes, we noticed we take a little more time trying to motivate those couples, share about it. We were open to the couples. And with the man, I was a man where we're more selfish, more, not already, but close. So by motivating it, by everything we can get, it's like a mechanic. You get all the tools, whatever you need to be a good mechanic. That's what we need as a couple too. And you know, that's all.
And then just share.
Question: what do you recommend for young couples when get married? They have to take NFP class or just options? I've been experienced young couples sometimes. We tell them about NFP, but I think after that they don't really go to the class.
Make it a requirement.
Requirement. So that's your.
They want to get married. Make it a requirement. Initially, when we came, we started worshiping in Our Lady of Guadalupe since '88, and it was not. And then when they made it mandatory, we heard some of the complaints, but they now, 10, 12 years from when I'm starting, when it wasn't a requirement, now we see a lot of couples right now coming from other parishes because we offer it in our parish. it's a mandatory, okay, and some will nag, some will like, but you know what? We're very open in sharing, and thanks be to God, we have strong support of our pastor, and we're just willing to share, and they will come. We make it available, and they come from surrounding little towns from where we are.
I have mixed thoughts on this question. I was the director of family life for the Diocese of Tulsa, and this was something that we wrestled with there. Couple of things. One is it's not an impediment canonically to marriage for them not to use this. And so I've always hesitated to make it a requirement. However, the USCCB does encourage that as a requirement. So I think that there has to be some sense of individualization as you're walking with a couple to know where they are and how they are. If maybe their life circumstances are such that they are approaching marriage but are beyond childbearing years or whatever the case. So I think that there needs to be some understanding in that regard. I think at least a knowledge, whether it's included in pre-Cana, some way to communicate the information about NFP, just to plant a seed. That we've ended up training some people that it was required, and they got through their classes and they got their certificate, and they didn't come to another follow-up after that. Yeah. But they have the knowledge now. And so I think it's something that needs to be weighed carefully, and I encourage it, but I also see.
And yeah, I would say whether required or not, sometimes that's a diocesan decision, that the exposure. The exposure is important. And I would say as a teacher, when we've lived in dioceses where it has not been required, I've had a much higher continuation rate because those that actually come and pay for the class, they paid for it and they want it. But the reason they want it is because they were exposed to it as well. And then, living in dioceses where it has been required, you get a lot more clients, but it can be more of a challenge to keep them engaged after the requirement is finished. If you do live in a place where it is required, I would recommend requiring a full course, so at least a first instruction and several follow-ups after that being what they have to do, as opposed to just the first instruction. Getting that, you have to practice it a little bit, and often that'll hook them into.
There's still a number of questions, but if I can interject on this point, because I find it very important. Teaching NFP, particularly as a requirement, needs to be accompanied, and I think marriage preparation, it needs to be a part. That's why we have a 2-day workshop, Life-Giving Love. Been giving it for a good number of years. We don't teach natural family planning during that workshop. We hardly mention it or contraception on Saturday all day, but we give all the underpinnings. Everybody getting married needs to understand what marriage is. It's an important part of marriage prep. How many of our marriage prep teachers can tell what the two inseparable ends of marriage are? What's the purpose of marriage? Couples need to know that. NFP, we require it in our parish, but it's like you don't have to use it, but it can be helpful if you're tempted to contracept, which could be damaging to your marriage. They have a right to know the damages that can happen to their marriage and the benefits they can receive. My strong feelings, that has to be part of marriage prep.
Pardon me for addressing maybe an uncomfortable part of our sexuality, but what always sticks in my mind is something I read 30 years ago, and it's from a perspective of a male, and I remember one of the most convincing things I ever saw about the what artificial contraception says about the male. This was written by a Lutheran gentleman. I forget if he was a pastor or not, but he wrote down. He said, our contraceptive mentality basically tells the man that he is an uncontrollable animal. It tells the man this because when Father Luke mentioned that in general, in our society, the man says the woman is the one responsible for. When you think about the barrier methods, you're usually talking about the woman, or you're talking about the condom for the man. But either way, whatever it's saying, it's telling the male that he is an uncontrollable animal. He cannot abstain. He is like the dog that has to do it or whatever. So I don't know if you have come across these mentality and how you deal with that.
Oh, well, we say a couple of things. The first thing is that whatever your opinion of the Girl Scouts, the Girl Scout cookies are amazing, not because they're really good, but because you can only get them every once in a while, right? Waiting for something makes it better. The second thing I like to say is that sex is like a box of Lucky Charms, right? It's magically delicious, but it's only part of this complete breakfast. You have to have other forms of intimacy outside of sexual intimacy for the health of a marriage.
One of the things that I want to share, because I know Frank, in one occasion, this gentleman asked, he was talking about abstinence. He says, well, you don't have any problem, but Frank can relate to me because, it's so, and then I said, well, I know I don't have a problem, but I've lived with this man, and the little knowledge that I have, in the hospitals, we have a department for heart, for maternity, for this, but they don't have for the department for a, what is it? Testicle. For men that can't wait and their testes explode, I told him. And he was like, and I said, it's manageable. Just pray, read, run, take a cold shower. So that's how this, but this guy, sometimes I go, if you know that you get stimulated by what you watch, but what you see or what you smell, don't get too close to the fire. I told him, but.
That's probably one of the biggest challenge. Like when woman's fertile, we were like more hungry, like an animal, and it's just the way God made us. It's part of and so there's a lot of discipline at the beginning. It's not easy, and like I told them, we're gonna go to sleep. We're all fertile. Please don't go on a real fancy thing, So it's one of the biggest challenge for me is that, you know what? I'm gonna die to myself. I'm gonna control myself. At that time, so we don't have to use artificial. I don't want her to get sick or get cancer later on by using artificial stuff. So that's my biggest gift for her.
Yes.
To die to myself, but I know when she's not fertile, we're gonna enjoy it as a couple.
Sure.
And that's when I share with those men. And the man, the one that challenges the most.
Don't studies also show that the woman's more amorous during her fertile time, right? I mean, anyway, but that's... Frank, you mentioned machismo, and those of us who hear confessions in Spanish often come across, sometimes come across couples, Hispanic couples, of course Anglo couples too, that have been sterilized, but almost always it's the woman. And there's this, when we hear confession in Spanish, and it's almost like, the man is saying, you're not going to, no me toca mis cojones, no? I mean, it's almost like, and so, but how do we preach, I'm asking for some counsel, we need to kind of, I think, challenge that machismo thinking, and that's really obviously not very macho to ask your spouse to be sterilized, and you don't have to. Anyway, any counsel for us priests or deacons who preach on this, and also counsel we can give in confession?
Well, what I was mentioning earlier is we find that a lot, and when we're instructing, we have 4 classes in English and Spanish, and we touch that issue because in our culture the machismo is there. One of the things that I told him, I said, look, you need to be conscious, what you're doing. Our marital embrace is a gift. And when you don't have to do anything, what are you giving? What is your yes mean or your no, And so jokingly I said, well, there's no department or in the hospital for men that their testes exploded because they had to abstain. Jokingly, but what we try to have them think, focus. What is this? We as children of God have the gift to say no, and not just like an animal. And that's how Frank and I, myself too, we give our testimony. And that has touched a lot of couples, because I said, I was to the point, Frank wasn't aware that, well, he thought I got married to have sex every day whenever I wanted it. And I go, I got married to be happy, to have a couple, to have a partner that we grow together and build our house, our family. And by the 5th year in our marriage, I compared myself. I was young. I was 20-something, mid-20s, and I compared myself to a handkerchief. And I asked men in our class, what do you use a handkerchief for? Especially when you're really congested with a sinus infection. And they see it. I go, visualize. What do you use a handkerchief? When Frank wasn't able to control himself, when Frank wasn't able to just go out of himself and stop being selfish and using me, he was using me as a handkerchief. And usually that touches guys more than girls, to the females. And we just get very intimate. We're very open. And thanks be to God, we have many stories of men thanking him for sharing in depth our story, and then helping them realize that they're a gift for one another, instead of that their wife is a gift, not an object.
I can't speak as much to it culturally, but we had a couple that spoke at our pre-Canis that, as they would talk about marriage, he would get a crucifix and say, guys, this is your job description, right? Yeah. Your job description is to love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. This is how he gave himself up for her, looking at this picture of sacrifice and suffering. And then the other, specifically for the guy who feels like he's got to be, the guy, he should be doing the heavy lifting, right? We're supposed to treat our wives tenderly, and that means that we protect them from things that would be difficult and hard. And so it's up to us guys to appeal to the person who thinks in that way more. It's your job to do the heavy lifting, and not to say, oh, well, you can handle it.
I try to present to people the new type of machismo. There's self-control and sacrifice. That's that's more manly. And a number of the guys, they'll witness how liberated they feel once they achieve self-control that they never thought they could, and they'll witness to other husbands.
NFP is a requirement at my parish, but sometimes I have a couple that says, oh, we contacted the couple and our schedule doesn't work, so they referred us to the website, so we're just going to do it on the website. And I just wondered how you feel about that, if that's really a good option or not.
Well, what website?
I think it's a ccli.org.
Okay. I would say, as Father said earlier, that having a personal teacher is always the best way to go. Whether that be in person with the couple right next to them, or whether that be in a one-on-one video chat kind of situation if it's a long distance. Because every woman is different. Every chart is different, and no matter, you can go through the class, you can read the books that are videoed, and they've got all the great information. But what happens when your chart doesn't look that way? What happens when what you're doing doesn't make sense with what you were taught? And that's where having someone to go to that is certified, that knows what they're doing, is invaluable, to be able to walk them through that, so they stick with it and don't just give up and say, oh, well, NFP didn't work for me, so oh well.
And I would say if their schedule doesn't work out, we teach online, but so do a number of other teachers across all methods. You will be able to find some teacher that can interface with them one-on-one in an online setting if you don't have someone locally.
I know that CCL, it's easy to do a study home course, and what they're doing now, couples that want to learn this method, and they're because of their schedule, they're reading, but they are assigned to us. For example, we have couples that start on their own because of their crazy schedule, but they're assigned to us, and whenever they have questions, we're there. I always send them a message to welcome them and to offer assistance and to let them know that we're walking with them. And we have crazy schedules too, to feel free to message, and then we'll respond to them for any questions, so that they can feel that somebody's there walking along.
Thank you both so much. Wonderful sharing valuable information.